Okay, welcome back, fellow human beings. We are here to talk today about a. Do we talk about a movie?
Um, a story. A story.
A story,
Yeah.
which was recently in the news.
Yeah. How's which story is it?
Well, when a movie makes it to the cinema
Mhm.
nowadays, it's considered to be a news, right?
I suppose.
Yeah,
I suppose.
because we I cannot even say it, infantilized our
Infantilized.
culture, infantilized our culture.
Trivialized.
Trivialized our culture. Well,
Yeah.
we turn ourselves into children by believing into all these space odysseys and Marvel universes where people fight against each other.
Well, it's escapism,
Escapism, yeah.
right?
Mm.
Um, there's a quote, I don't remember who it was by, saying, I don't read to learn, right? It's not the question. I don't read to learn the truth, right? That's not helping me, but I read to dream.
Mm.
But that was, you
And
know,
dreams are,
it's a good question.
what do they say at the beginning of the movie? Before the movie starts, Dune.
Oh,
Dreams are
right.
messages from the deep.
I don't recall.
It's in the
I don't
Harkonnen
recall.
sound, you know?
Yeah,
Or
I
is it in the Harkonnen sound? I think it says like dreams are messages of the deep.
don't remember that.
And then because
Wasn't it Zendaya who was doing
huh?
that? In the movie, it wasn't Zendaya who was doing the intro?
No, like this dreams are messages from the deep comes right at the beginning, even before the logo. It comes before the movie
Yeah,
starts.
yeah. I'm not remembering. Like, I'm not recalling. I saw it twice in theaters, but the
Mhm.
first time I was like a minute and a half late
Mhm,
with a
mhm.
friend, so I might have just missed that. I just remember Zendaya's monologue at the
Oh
beginning.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And um, in the novel, a beginning is the time to make sure the balances are properly set.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's for the beginning, let's say very briefly,
Mhm.
what is Dune about?
Science fiction odyssey or space opera um, that looks at questions of ecology and politics
Mhm,
and faith and religion and
mhm,
society. Apparently, at the time when Herbert wanted to publish it, he was rejected 28 or 29 times or some maybe it was 48. I don't know. It was
Makes a good story at
an
least.
inordinate, yeah, an
Never gave
inordinate,
up. And now
yeah.
he's in a motivational video on YouTube.
Why the series? Um, yeah, but at the time, I think he was trying to pitch it as not speculative fiction, but a lot of sci-fi publishers were just looking for speculative fiction. So the fact that the novel touched on questions of ecology and the society, and that it wasn't just about how shiny the spaceship was, right?
Hmm.
But that it, in
It's
some
not
way,
just Star Wars, right?
yeah, no, no. Well, and prior to Star Wars, considerably, I think.
It's after and prior to Star Wars. It's in between. I think it's after The Empire Strikes
No,
Back.
no, no,
Oh,
no.
yeah, right, the book,
Yeah, the
right?
book.
I'm
Sorry.
thinking about the David Lynch movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
No, no.
you're
The
right,
book
you're right.
was long before that, and there was. I feel like there are lots and lots of sources that people like to say was the inspiration for Star Wars. Um, I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of any George Lucas interviews, so maybe he talks
Yeah.
about that.
I
Um,
mean, Star Wars is the cultural center of the 20th century in terms of cinema, in a sense, right?
it changed ideas about blockbusters,
Yeah.
American
Saying
blockbusters
it
in some
that
way.
way, yeah.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
the center
absolutely.
of blockbuster movies, yeah.
Yeah, or it
Mm.
redefined what the blockbuster was.
Hmm.
Because I think, you know,
So, like, when you say something about Dune, you somehow have to say something about Star Wars. But, like, I think I said before that we live in an infantile culture, right?
mm,
I think Star Wars is the infantile moment where it turns into escapism, where we stay like with these characters of our past. But Dune has the intention to say more about our politics.
Well, and our motivations and our desires, potentially. Um, yeah, like with Star Wars, that is very much
A fairy tale.
banal, well, banal escapism. And even a lot of Star Trek, I feel, is a lot of, not all, but like a lot is, I feel, very banal
Yeah.
escapism. Compared to like other types of speculative fiction, there, yeah, but that aside,
So now that we got rid of all the Star Wars fans and the Star Trek fans, let's start talking for real about Dune. So, what is Dune, by the way? What is Dune? Why is
so
it called Dune, by the way?
in the book and in the movies, it was a reference to a planet. A
Yeah,
planet
but
where,
Dune is Arrakis,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
The planet is called Arrakis.
hmm
What's the difference between Arrakis and Dune? Is it like the morning star is the evening star, or?
No, I think it's just that Herbert was fleshing out his universe by giving a colloquial name for a place to help the readers think about how this place or this world was seen by other people in that shared universe, right? That it was seen as desolate and empty, and that there was nothing there, right, except for the oil slash water metaphor for our current day. Um, so reading it, I think Herbert does a lot of things to try to share the perspective or paradigm of different characters in the novels with the viewers. So I was listening to Herbert reading part of Heretics of Dune. And I read Heretic. So Heretics of Dune is the fifth book, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And I read it in 2004, I think. And I don't think I've read it since. So just listening to some of the audio commentary, not the audio commentary, listening to Herbert reading part of it. He was going through a number of the Bene Gesserit characters in that novel, talking about they're having a meeting and what sort of pragmatic things they were going to do in a particular situation. And throughout it, and one of the really beautiful things about a novel is the character who was the center of that part of the story was reminiscing about the motivations of other characters, but how the possible actions they would take would have an impact on the psychology of other characters, and how that related to her own experiences within a similar institution or institutionalized situation as a child.
So it's also a study about psychology in a sense?
Well, the psychology of people in particular societal settings. And so with Herbert referring to the planet as Dune, that's a way to trigger a whole host of ideas
Yes.
around how different characters are perceiving parts of that universe, so that there can be conversation about how people within that universe perceive parts of it differently.
Yeah, there's the same meaning, but a different sense, as Frege would say.
Yes, sometimes an entirely different meaning too, but yeah.
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 Well, I mean, meaning
Oh,
is
sorry.
meaning is a technical term. It just means the object imagined in
Right.
mind external reality.
Okay, yeah.
And sense is the way of how we refer to it based on our semantic nets that we have in our mind.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's say a little bit about the characters. So as far as I understand, I haven't read the books. I'm a huge fan of Dune.
Via the video game, which is amazing. I've never seen it. So you're bringing a perspective to Dune that I was never able to engage with.
When I watch it,
kid.
I always have the strategic mindset, right? I see like troops attacking, and I played the 3D game,
Yeah.
but I also played like an RPG where you were like
Yeah.
from an inside perspective where you were playing Paul Atreides.
Okay.
Atreides.
Yeah.
I say Atreides, it just sounds
Yeah.
better to me. And this is Paul, yeah, here on the picture. And So as far as I understand it, and you maybe have to correct me with regard to the books, in the movie he is the central figure of the
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. He was the main character in the first three books, or
Hmm.
two books, I guess. The third book was his kids a bit, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So the book spans way larger, it spans a way larger history, right?
The series of novels, because I had a
Mm.
friend after we watched the movie asking, "Oh, do you think they'll make a series out of the rest of the books?" And I was like, "Well, probably not, because most of the characters aren't
Mhm.
consistent throughout the books. There are a few, but not Paul." And
So what is the role of Paul? Or let's summarize the story again a little
mhm.
bit. So we had the Harkonnens for 80 years harvesting Dune, and
Mhm.
they made a fortune by it. They were placed on this planet by virtue of
The
a
Emperor.
decree of the
Yeah,
Emperor
yeah,
or
yeah.
something. And they need to harvest spice,
Mhm.
melange, or how's it called?
Spice Melange is like Dune in that it's another in-universe word or
Okay.
adjective for it. So, um, but the metaphor or allegory for oil, right?
Yeah,
The galaxy runs on spice. Like
yeah.
interstellar travel in this story doesn't happen without the
But
spice.
you know,
Just
it's not an energy resource, as far as I understand it. It's a
no, no.
psychological resource, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the people flying the spaceships need the spice to have a prescient ability so they don't fly into a star.
Yeah.
Because there aren't computers in this world to do those calculations for us.
Because of the robot wars.
Yes,
Uh,
which
you know, that's such a great idea to have the idea of robot wars, where you solve a lot of like science fiction questions, where you just say, yeah,
yeah.
we don't have artificial intelligence because
Mhm.
it's too dangerous.
Well, and I feel like when we're talking about foundation, that was also alluded to, that
Mm-hmm.
there's conflict because of sentient machines that limited how we chose to engage with that.
Mm-hmm.
But between that and then the shields that slow down fast-moving objects, um, it- like interesting sci-fi shortcuts to sort of get back to what's almost a sword and sorcery story in a sense. It's not at
Yeah.
all, but to
Or
like
a Game of Thrones. A
yeah,
Game of Thrones in a sci-fi
to
setting.
get back to sort of medieval I don't want to say conventions, but like aesthetics or certain elements of that which again have a sci-fi explanation, but
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting part because the movie is, or gives the semblance at least, of being anti-democratic.
yeah, well, it's a feudal society that doesn't have computers or guns.
Hmm.
Spaceships, but no computers or guns. And um,
They don't have democracies.
yeah, well, there's a feudal system
Mm.
essentially, with the emperor and then each of the houses having their own fiefdoms
Mhm.
over one or several planets. Um,
And then we have the people on Arrakis, which are the Fremen,
yeah, yeah.
and they believe in the return of the Messias or the first arrival. Is it the
Messiah.
return or Messiah? Yeah.
I don't think they use that language.
Mhm.
Not that I remember. I think it was maybe it was arrival, or
Well, they
something
had
to
like
that.
the robot wars were the jihad, right?
That so in the story they called it the Butlerian Jihad, and
Hmm.
then the prequel books
Hmm.
covered that and the character of I want to say Serena Butler, but maybe I'm
Uh-huh.
mistaken. It doesn't matter. Um, yeah, so in Frank Herbert's novels, he'd alluded to different parts of the prehistory or the space before Dune, um, where the Fremen were nomads who'd
Hmm.
basically been kicked off of multiple planets,
Yes.
or and were enslaved on one planet, and then had this exodus, and a lot of it was like a very overt parallel with Old Testament narratives. Um,
Here we have the Fremen.
yeah. And it was interesting because, or I thought it was interesting to use that sort of metaphor for,
Being kicked out into the desert,
well,
having
being
a
kicked out.
religious experience there.
Well, in the Freemen were presented as people with a fanatical
Mm-hmm.
faith or following, um, and again, whether it was a reference to, New Testament or sorry, the Old Testament rather, or whether it was a reference to at times, there were elements of like Muslim expansion and
Mm-hmm.
conquest and the different caliphates. Um, but while that narrative is going on about how these people have their faith and that influences their actions and their perspectives, you also have another organization, which I'll let you introduce, who have stated very specifically that they created the narrative of a Messiah within different cultures as a way of protecting their own, so that they could use this Messiah narrative to protect individuals within their own organization,
Mm-hmm.
um,
That's interesting,
as
yeah.
one of several ways to manipulate society. So again, thinking about the name Dune being again that
Yeah.
separate signifier from the object. Um, there's also a very explicit discussion about religion as a tool for political machinations,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
or or on the other hand, how it's being used for different types of societal goals being pursued. So for the
Yeah.
Fremen, they
It's
don't.
it's very
Yeah.
interesting what you say, because religion, as soon as it exists, it will be many things at once. It will
Hmm.
be a political instrument.
Hmm.
It will be an instrument for a religious cult.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it will also have an individual significance.
Well, individual significance and a social significance,
Mm-hmm.
separate from either the political or the, I don't want to say ideological, but
Yeah.
that there is those different gradients
But
to that
I think this is a very reflected way of looking at politics,
person. Hmm.
because usually we have a very simple interpretation of a movie like that, and we say, oh, yeah, it shows us how bad politics are.
Yeah.
But here we say, well, but see, politics works on different layers at the same time.
Hmm.
And one part of it is certainly that it's rather cynical, a cynical, let's say, um, meta occurrence that occurs on top of what people do on the individual level.
Yeah.
And of course, it influences the people back, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's not enough just to say, well, you need to see who benefits from, because it's all about resources,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just have a war because it's all about resources. That's why the Americans go to the Iraq,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's all about resources.
Yeah.
I think the movie, or not the movie,
The story.
the story
Yeah.
tells us, without telling us immediately what it is, because
Hmm.
I think that would constitute a bad book, right? It
Yeah.
tells
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
you maybe have to look deeper than just the surface of the desert planet.
Well, the perspective that looking deeper, it shifts depending on which characters are having
Hmm.
which conversations.
Very good point, yeah.
Um, and each of the chapters, I think with at least no, I think, so I haven't read the last book that he wrote, Chapter House Dune, but I think with the other five, all of the chapters have introductions from either some sort of text or speech or book
Hmm.
or guide or quoted sayings within that universe. So each chapter is getting qualified, if you will, by some body of knowledge that's available to some characters and not
Uh-huh,
others.
uh-huh. Very, yeah.
So that development, um, that nuance is very deliberately baked in.
Yeah.
Whereas again, thinking about Star Wars, just because the comparison is easy to make.
No wonder
Uh,
that he was rejected 49 times,
yeah, yeah.
because reading something like that, you would probably say this has no consistent
Who is
structure.
the audience for this,
Yes.
right? Because it wasn't intended to be published as a literary work,
Uh-huh.
right? It wasn't. He wasn't going to the same publishers as T.S. Eliot or other modernists might have
Hmm.
approached decades earlier. Um, And yeah, for science fiction at that time, it would have been uh, I don't think the idea of high and low concept science fiction existed yet when he
Mm-hmm.
was trying to publish. Um, but thinking about Star
Well,
Wars,
when did he publish it and which year?
I don't know. I want to say 68, but that's a
Mm-hmm.
guess. It could have been earlier because it did precede, like the publication preceded Star Wars by a while. Like I want to say a decade, maybe a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but thinking about again the Star Wars movies, I one explanation that I really liked for why the first three that came out chronologically were very popular, like episode 4 through
Mm-hmm.
6, compared to the second iteration, was that in the first three, it was all based around personal narratives, and the individuals stuck within a larger situation,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't about the larger situation. Whereas the next three movies tried to fill in that geopolitical context and focused on that perhaps more than the individual narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And some people felt, a number of Star Wars, like very obsessive Star Wars fans who I've talked to, didn't find that that resonated with them as much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so whereas again with the novel, um, there's a shifting between the personal and then the other societal layers as it's affecting people.
Very interesting so
Yeah.
far. So we have already talked a little bit. We make you a little pause. You can either listen to this on the podcast as a whole, or you can watch the single parts at YouTube. I would be happy if you do so and give us a like. I noticed like so my perspective on Dune, even though I listen to a lot of people talking about it and playing the video game and
Mhm.
watching the movies, is still very limited. And it's very interesting to hear what you have to say
Oh,
right
okay.
now about it,
Okay.
because it corrects a lot of the views that I have on very simple views that I
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah,
have, and
yeah.
that just say, no, you have to think it in a more complex way. So I'm interested in talking about
Mm,
that a little bit
mm.
more after a short break.